Little Women, Chapter 8, A Telegram. November is the most disagreeable month in the whole year, said Margaret, standing at the window one dull afternoon, looking out at the frost-bitten garden. Beth, who sat at the other window, said, smiling, "If something very pleasant should happen now to this family, we should think it a delightful month. And look, two pleasant things are going to happen right away. Marmee is coming down the street, and Laurie is tramping through the garden, as if he had something nice to tell." In they both came, Mrs. March with her usual question, "Any letter from father, girls?" said Laurie. And Laurie with, "Won't some of you come for a drive?" All the girls but Meg agreed to come along. "Can I do anything for you, Madam Mother?" asked Laurie. "No, thank you, except call at the post office, if you'll be so kind, dear. It's our day for a letter, and the postman hasn't been. Father is as regular as the sun, but there's some delay on the way, perhaps." A ring at the door interrupted her, and a minute after Hannah came in with a letter. "It's one of them horrid telegraph things, Mum," she said, handing it over. At the word telegraph, Mrs. March snatched it, read the 2 lines it contained, and dropped back into her chair. Jo now took it and read aloud in a frightened voice. "Mrs. March, your husband is very ill. Come at once. S. Hale, Blank Hospital, Washington." How suddenly the world seemed to change, as the girls gathered about their mother, feeling as if all the happiness and support of their lives was about to be taken from them. Mrs. March read the message over and stretched out her arms to her daughters, saying, in a tone they never forgot, "I shall go at once, but it may be too late. Oh, children, children, help me to bear it." For several minutes there was nothing but the sound of sobbing in the room, mingled with words of comfort and hopeful whispers. Poor Hannah was the first to recover. With her, work was the cure for most hurts. "The Lord keep the dear man. I won't waste no time a crying, but get your things ready right away, Mum," she said, as she wiped her face on her apron, gave her mistress a warm shake of the hand, and went away, to work like 3 women in one. "She's right. There's no time for tears now. Be calm, girls, and let me think." In a few moments she asked, "Where's Laurie?" "Here, ma'am." "Oh, let me do something," cried the boy, hurrying from the next room. "Send a telegram saying I will come at once. The next train goes early in the morning. I'll take that." "What else?" "The horses are ready," he said. "Leave a note at Aunt March's." She sat down and wrote the note, for the money for the sad little journey would have to be borrowed. "Now go, dear, but don't drive at a desperate pace. There is no need of that." And off Laurie went. "Jo, run to the rooms and tell Mrs. King that I can't come. On the way, get these things. I'll write them down. They'll be needed, and I must go prepared for nursing. Hospital supplies are not always plentiful. Beth, go and ask Mr. Lawrence for a couple of bottles of old wine. I'm not too proud to beg for father. He shall have the best of everything. Amy, tell Hannah to get down the black trunk. And Meg, come and help me find my things." Everyone scattered like leaves before a gust of wind. Mr. Lawrence came hurrying back with Beth, bringing every comfort the kind old gentleman could think of for Mr. March, and promises of protection for the girls during their mother's absence. There was nothing he didn't offer, even himself as an escort to Mrs. March, but she would not hear of the old gentleman's undertaking the long journey. He left, saying he would be back soon. In a short while Mr. Brooke came over, and Meg discovered him in the entry. "I'm very sorry to hear of this, Miss March," he said. "I came to offer myself as escort to your mother. Mr. Lawrence has work for me in Washington, and it will give me real satisfaction to be of service to her there." Meg put out her hand, with a face full of gratitude. "How kind you are! Mother will accept, I'm sure, and it will be such a relief to know that she has someone to take care of her. Thank you very, very much." She led him into the parlor, saying she would call her mother. Everything was arranged by the time Laurie returned with a note from Aunt March, enclosing the desired money. Mrs. March put the money in her purse and went on with her preparations. The short afternoon wore away. All the other errands were done, but still Jo did not return home from Mrs. King's. They began to get anxious, but finally she came walking in, with a very strange expression on her face, as she laid a roll of bills before her mother, saying, "That's my contribution towards making father comfortable and bringing him home." "My dear, where did you get it?" $25? Joe, I hope you haven't done anything rash. No, it's mine honestly. I didn't beg, borrow, or steal it. I earned it. And I don't think you'll blame me, for I only sold what was my own. As she spoke, Jo took off her bonnet, and a general outcry arose, for all her long, thick hair was cut short. Your hair! Your beautiful hair! As everyone exclaimed, Jo said, rumpling up the little hair left on her head, It doesn't affect the fate of the nation, so don't cry, Beth. It will do my brains good to have that mop taken off. My head feels light and cool. I'm satisfied, so please take the money, and let's have supper. Tell me all about it, Jo. I am not quite satisfied, but I can't blame you, for I know how willingly you sacrificed it. But, my dear, it was not necessary, and I'm afraid you'll regret it one of these days, said Mrs. March. No, I won't, returned Jo. I was wanting to do something for father. I hadn't the least idea of selling my hair at first, but as I went along I kept thinking what I could do. In a barber's window I saw tails of hair with the price marked, and one black tail, not so thick as mine, was $40. It came over me all of a sudden that I had one thing to make money out of, and without stopping to think I walked in, asked if they bought hair, and what they would give me for mine. The barber rather stared at first, as if he wasn't used to having girls bounce into his shop and ask him to buy their hair. He said he didn't care about mine. It wasn't the fashionable color. Then I told him why I needed the money, and it changed his mind. His wife overheard my story to him, and she said so kindly, Take it, Thomas. I'd do as much for our son any day if I had hair worth selling. He took a last look at my hair while the man got his things, and that was the end of it. I will confess, though, I felt odd when I saw the dear old hair laid out on the table, and felt only the short, rough ends on my head. The woman saw me look at it, and picked out a long lock for me to keep. I'll give it to you, Marmee, just to remember. Mrs. March took the wavy brown lock and laid it away in her desk. She said, Thank you, dearie. No one wanted to go to bed when at 10 o'clock Mrs. March put by the last finished job and said, Come, girls. Beth went to the piano and played the father's favorite hymn. All began bravely, but broke down one by one, till Beth was left alone, singing with all her heart. Go to bed, and don't talk, for we must be up early and shall need all the sleep we can get. Good night, my darlings, said Mrs. March, as the hymn ended. They kissed her quietly and went to bed. Beth and Amy soon fell asleep in spite of the great troubles, but Meg lay awake, thinking the most serious thoughts she had ever known in her short life. Jo lay motionless and seemed asleep, till a stifled sob came from her. Jo, dear, what is it? Are you crying about father? No, not now. My hair, burst out poor Jo. Meg kissed and petted her sister. I'm not sorry, said Jo. I'd do it again tomorrow if I could. Don't tell anyone. It's all over now. I thought you were asleep, so I just made a little private moan for my one beauty. In the cold gray dawn, the sisters lit their lamp as they dressed. They agreed to say goodbye cheerfully and send their mother on her journey, unsaddened by tears or complaints for them. Everything seemed very strange when they went down, so dim and still outside, so full of light and bustle within. The big trunk stood ready in the hall. Mother's cloak and bonnet lay on the sofa, and Mother herself sat trying to eat, but looking so pale and worn that the girls found it very hard to keep their resolution. Meg's eyes kept filling in spite of herself. Jo had to hide her face more than once, and the little girls wore a troubled expression, as if sorrow was a new experience to them. Nobody talked much, but as the time drew near and they sat waiting for the carriage, Mrs. March said to the girls, who were all busied about her, Children, I leave you to Hannah's care and Mr. Lawrence's protection. Hannah is faithfulness itself, and our good neighbor will guard you as if you were his own. I have no fears for you. Don't grieve and fret when I am gone. Go on with your work as usual, for work is a blessed comfort. Hope and keep busy. Yes, mother. Meg, dear, be prudent. Watch over your sisters. Consult Hannah, and in any trouble, go to Mr. Lawrence. Be patient, Joe. Don't get too sad or do rash things. Write to me often and be my brave girl, ready to help and cheer us all. Beth, comfort yourself with your music, and be faithful to the little home duties. And you, Amy, help all you can. Be obedient and keep happy, safe at home. We will, Mother, we will. Goodbye, my darlings. God bless and keep us all, whispered Mrs. March, as she kissed one dear little face after the other and hurried into the carriage. Then Laurie and his grandfather came over to see her off. As she rolled away with Mr. Brooke, the sun came out, and looking back, she saw it shining on the group at the gate. They smiled and waved their hands, and the last thing she saw as she turned the corner was the four bright faces, and behind them, like a bodyguard, old Mr. Lawrence, faithful Hannah, and devoted Laurie. Okay, let's go back up. There's not very many today, which is a good thing because we're behind. So I think I passed it. Yes, I did. Okay, so the first one is, I came to offer myself as escort to your mother, said Mr. Brooke. So let's copy that. So it was very uncommon for a woman to travel by herself. There usually needed to be an escort. I mean, it happened. It wasn't like it didn't happen, but it was more common to have an escort, which means just a gentleman to accompany a woman so she was protected. Oh, not Laurie. We need to go down to Mr. Brooke. So this is going to be a dialogue for Mr. Brooke. He's offering himself as protection. There it goes. And protection and escort for Miss March as she travels to Washington, D.C. to take care of father who's been injured in the war. He's taken sick. As she spoke, Jo took off her bonnet, and a general outcry arose, for all her long, thick hair was cut short. So these are actions by Jo. So we'll go to Jo's page. And women didn't cut their hair. They kept their hair very long, and they combed it and brushed it and took care of it, and they braided it and, did different things with it. But it was very fashionable to have long hair. So this was quite unfashionable for her to cut off all her hair. And $25, that was a lot of money back then, a lot of money. So it was quite a sacrifice, but it was for a good reason. So that Marmee would have money to take to Washington, D.C. to help father get well. She needed to buy anything, maybe any kind of medicines or bandages or anything. And it was a precious gift to be able to have just a piece of the hair, so like a little chunk of the hair that was cut off. And so Jo gave it to Marmee. And now we have an action by Miss March, by Marmee. Let's go find Marmee. Where's she? Right before Hannah, slide 7. Now we have an action for her. There it goes. Down to 10. She takes the hair and she puts it in her desk. Puts it in a safe spot. Always remember the sacrifice that Jo made. Goodbye, my darlings. God bless us and keep us all, whispered Mrs. March. So dialogue, Mrs. March. Dialogue for Marmee. And she whispered it, but let me see, look at that again. Yeah, no, it's out loud. I thought maybe it was an interior monologue, but it's not. She's saying it out loud to everybody. Oops, yep. Okay, so grab that little square right there if you need to. Just drag it down. And that's perfect. And that was the last one. All right, we are done.